Hi everyone, and welcome back to Blatantly Bookish. I'm Marissa, and today I'm here with the second installment of the Wuthering Heights discussion. So I'm a bit Wuthering Heights out. I read Wuthering Heights in October, as you guys know, and I have just been putting off making this video, mostly because I can't organize my thoughts. The ending for me has always been something that's really difficult to wrap my head around and to make sense of with Wuthering Heights, and I'll just do my best. So something I loved about the second half of the book was all of the insults that were in it. There are some really genius insults that are thrown around in the second half of the novel. I think Hareton at one point is called an infernal calf. Heathcliff calls Isabella a wicked slut in front of her son, Linton. And somebody, I think it's Hareton, calls Catherine a saucy witch. So next time you're in need of a good insult, feel free to call somebody a saucy witch. But a character I want to talk a lot more about right now is Hareton. So Hareton is a fascinating character. He has this relationship with Catherine that sort of mimics Heathcliff's original relationship with the older generation of Catherine. Hareton he's described as this wild weed, that he's untamed, unrefined, and that he's sort of neglected, much in the same way that Heathcliff was. You know, he's oppressed by an outside force. Heathcliff was oppressed by Hindley, and Hareton is oppressed in turn by Heathcliff in sort of this crazy revenge plot. So something that is really interesting is actually the relationship between Hareton and Heathcliff. And so I think it's really beautifully explained in this quote. So Heathcliff is speaking about Hareton. I've got him faster than his scoundrel of a father secured me, and lower, for he takes a pride in his brutishness. I've taught him to scorn everything extra animal as silly and weak. Don't you think Hindley would be proud of his son if he could see him? Almost as proud as I am of mine. But there's this difference. One is gold, put to the use of paving stones, and the other is tin, polished to ape a service of silver. Mine has nothing valuable about it, yet I shall have the merit of making it go as far as such poor stuff can go. His had first-rate qualities, and they are lost, rendered worse than unavailing. And he goes on and says, the best is Hareton is damnably fond of me. You'll own that I've outmatched Hindley there. So I think this quote has a lot of stuff to pick at. I mean, there's, first of all, the concept that everyone is not treated as a person. They are treated as pawns. They are its. He refers to both his natural son and Hareton, who is sort of like his son in other ways, as it. And they're tin, and they're metals, they're inanimate objects, and he's just trying to squeeze as much shine and value out of them as possible. So for him, Hareton is, of course, his revenge against Hindley. Even though Hindley is dead and gone, he keeps thinking about Hindley and how Hindley would react to Hareton. And there's that wonderfully sarcastic part is, you know, don't you think he'd be proud? Just like I'm proud of my son. And of course, he is not proud of Linton at all. In fact, he sees this, you know, sort of sickly, sniveling, pale child and is like, how did I produce this? And then there's this fact that Hareton is damnably fond of Heathcliff. You know, he views him as a father in many ways. He's the only person he has. Yes, Heathcliff is just terrible to him, but is, you know, all he knows in life. That's his dad, basically. That's who's raising him. So not only does Heathcliff treat Hareton terribly, but Hareton is sort of like a dog, like loyal to the very end. Hareton is compared to a dog at some point, and I think he, in this sense, is sort of that tame dog, that dog who's been trained, and I think there's a lot to be said about sort of what is genetics, what can be taught, and what is inherent to oneself. So we have to talk about Heathcliff's death. Heathcliff dies, and as a reader, I am like, finally! And there's that creepy description of him dead with the window open, which harkens back to the scene from the beginning of the book where Lockwood is haunted by Catherine's ghost. And you almost wonder if Cathy finally came to Heathcliff on his deathbed, or if he was just sitting there waiting for her as he was dying. But either way, windows play a really interesting role in this book, and I think there's more to be said about them. And doors and walls, too, actually. Anything that, binds one space and separates it from another. And of course, while we're talking about windows, we can harken back to the beginning where Lockwood is looking at the different writing of Catherine, her evolution of her name. So the first generation Catherine is born Catherine Earnshaw of Wuthering Heights. She falls in love with Heathcliff, but marries Edgar Linton, becoming Catherine Linton. Her daughter, on the other hand, goes in the reverse order. Her daughter is born Catherine Linton, actually does officially become Catherine Heathcliff, because she marries Linton Heathcliff. And then by the end, she has reverted back to Catherine Earnshaw. And so there are a few different ways of looking at that ending and that progression of names, really. In the end, young Catherine did what the first generation Catherine couldn't, which was making amends with the Heathcliff-like figure, in this case Hareton, by marrying him despite his poor and uncouth upbringing. But a different way of looking at the ending is by lineage and blood relations. And so Hareton is an Earnshaw, and Catherine is a Linton, with some Earnshaw mixed in as well. So the two of them coming together with Heathcliff dead and gone is very cyclical. It brings us right back to the beginning of the novel with the Earnshaw and Linton families in their proper and peaceful balance without the outsider, without Heathcliff. And then a third way of reading the ending for me is by treating the younger generation as a separate narrative, that we can see their marriage, the marriage between Catherine and Hareton, as finally having escaped from Heathcliff's tyranny. And I think a lot of critics and people in general see their marriage as a melding of the domesticity that is classically thought of as Thrushcross Grange and the natural ruggedness of Wuthering Heights. And again, it is more complicated than that, as we have talked about in the previous video, but I think them coming together sort of embraces all aspects of domesticity and of marriage, both the facade of marriage and its true nature. So I said we talk about Heathcliff and Catherine's relationship and that creepy passage where he talks about them mingling in the earth together. So let me find that for you. So he's telling Nellie what he did. "I'll tell you what I did yesterday. I got the sexton, who was digging Linton's grave, to remove the earth off her coffin lid. And I opened it. I thought once I would have stayed there when I saw her face again. It is hers yet. He had hard work to stir me, but he said it would change if the air blew on it, so I struck one side of the coffin loose and covered it up. Not Linton's side. Damn him. I wish he'd been soldered in lead, and I bribed the sexton to pull it away. When I'm laid there and slide mine out too, I'll have made it so, and then by the time Linton gets to us, he'll not know which is which." And then it says later that they buried him to the scandal of the whole neighborhood as he had wished. So there's this really creepy passage where Heathcliff is basically looking at the dead Catherine. He digs up her grave. He bribes somebody to dig up her grave. And then he's just in love with this dead body, and he breaks part of her coffin so that he can be buried next to her and mingle in the earth with her for all eternity. And that's their relationship. Their relationship is so twisted and so creepy, I can't even begin to scratch the surface of it. I said I was going to do a whole separate video on Catherine and Heathcliff, and I just don't think I have the stomach to do it. There are so many lines I could point to, things like the very famous one that their soul is, how Heathcliff is saying, "Catherine Earnshaw, you may not rest as long as I am living. You said I killed you. Haunt me then. The murdered do haunt their murderers, I believe. I know that ghosts have wandered on earth. Be with me always, take any form, drive me mad, only do not leave me in this abyss where I cannot find you. Oh God, it is unutterable. I cannot live without my life. I cannot live without my soul. It's this concept that they're the same person almost, that they are so entwined. And I think looking at this from a modern day view, it's a very needy relationship and not verging on, I think it's an abusive relationship, to be honest. However, there's this element that I read into it as almost a critique of marriage. And I don't know if anyone else sees it this way, but I feel like the way they are so dependent on each other, the way they are one person, yet they're obviously seriously disturbed people. It's not like you want to be Catherine and Heathcliff. I don't think anyone, I hope nobody actually reads this story wanting to be Catherine and or Heathcliff. But this concept of marriage in Victorian society as, you know, two becoming one, I think that's just really overdone in this book, almost to the point of a critique. So those are my thoughts on Wuthering Heights. I am, at this point, completely Wuthering Heights out. I've talked about this book ad nauseum, and there's still just so much more to say, I feel. So I would love to hear what you guys think of this video, the book in general, the characters, whatever you have to say, I'd like to hear it. Please comment down below, like this video if you liked it, and subscribe to my channel. And I look forward to seeing you in another video soon.